The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cracked pavement of Millbrook's Main Street as Captain Sarah Reeves stepped out of her decade-old Honda Civic. The small Georgia town looked exactly like the pictures her late father had shown her: weathered brick storefronts, a diner with peeling paint, and American flags hanging from every other lamppost. But there was something else in the air, something she hadn't expected: the weight of suspicious stares. Sarah straightened her posture instinctively, a habit from 15 years in the United States Marine Corps. At 42, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd earned every scar, every stripe, every lesson the hard way. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore simple jeans and a faded Marines t-shirt. Walking beside her, perfectly healed, was Atlas, a 3-year-old German shepherd with intelligent brown eyes and a glossy black and tan coat. Atlas had been more than a companion during her last deployment in Afghanistan. He'd been a military working dog, trained in explosives detection, and he'd saved her unit more times than she could count. When she'd retired from active duty 6 months ago, she'd moved heaven and earth to adopt him. Now, they were both adjusting to civilian life in the town her father had loved, the town where she'd inherited his small house on the outskirts. "Come on, boy," Sarah murmured, and Atlas trotted beside her as they walked toward the hardware store. She'd been in Millbrook for 3 weeks, keeping mostly to herself, fixing up the old house, trying to find her footing in a world that felt uncomfortably slow after years of military precision. But today, she needed supplies, and that meant venturing into town. Inside Miller's Hardware, the bell above the door chimed. An older man behind the counter looked up, his expression neutral but unwelcoming. 2 customers browsing the aisles glanced her way, then deliberately turned their backs. Sarah had faced down insurgents, navigated military politics, and commanded respect in a male-dominated combat zone. But somehow, the cold shoulder from these strangers stung in a different way. "Excuse me," she said politely, approaching the counter. "I'm looking for exterior wood stain and—" "No dogs allowed," the man interrupted, not meeting her eyes. Sarah blinked. "He's a trained military working dog. He's better behaved than most people." "Store policy, no dogs." The man's jaw was set, his arms crossed. Atlas sat perfectly still at her side, not even panting, the picture of discipline. Sarah felt heat rising in her chest but kept her voice level. "I understand. I'll tie him outside." She led Atlas out and secured his leash to a post, giving him the hand signal to stay. He settled immediately, watching her through the window. When she returned inside, the atmosphere felt even colder. As she gathered her supplies, she overheard whispers from the next aisle. "That's the Reeves woman, moved into old Tom's place. Heard she was military, one of those women trying to prove something. My cousin's in the sheriff's department. Says she's already been trouble, asking questions about regulations, like she knows better than folks who have lived here their whole lives." Sarah's hands tightened on the paint can she was holding. She hadn't asked anyone about regulations. She'd simply inquired at the county office about getting Atlas registered as a service animal, which was her legal right. She brought her items to the counter. The owner rang them up in silence, his movements sharp and impatient. "That'll be $87.50, he said. Sarah handed him her credit card. He swiped it, waited, then frowned. "Declined." "That's not possible. Try again, please." He did with exaggerated slowness. "Declined, you got cash." Sarah's pulse quickened. She just deposited her retirement check. There was no reason for the card to decline. "Can you tell me what the error says?" "Just says declined, lady. You gonna pay or not?" Heat crept up her neck and she was aware of other customers watching. She pulled out her debit card. "Try this one." Same result. The owner's expression shifted to something almost satisfied. "Guess you'll have to come back when you got money." Sarah's military training kept her voice steady, but her eyes flashed. "There's clearly a technical issue. I'll call my bank." "You do that somewhere else." He pushed her items aside dismissively. She walked out, face burning, and untied Atlas. The dog immediately sensed her tension and pressed against her leg. As she headed toward her car, a Millbrook police cruiser pulled up slowly alongside her. The window rolled down, revealing an officer in his late 30s with a thick neck and cold blue eyes. His nameplate read Officer Drake. "Ma'am, I'm gonna need you to stop right there," he said, his tone already accusatory. Sarah stopped, one hand on Atlas's collar. "Is there a problem, officer?" Drake climbed out of the cruiser, his hand resting casually on his belt near his weapon, a gesture Sarah recognized as intimidation. "Got a complaint about an aggressive dog threatening customers at Miller's Hardware." Sarah's eyebrows rose. "My dog has been sitting outside, perfectly still, the entire time I was in the store." "That's not what I heard." Drake circled around her slowly, looking Atlas up and down. The dog remained calm but watchful. "Looks like a dangerous breed to me. We got leash laws in this town. Dangerous dog laws too." "He's leashed, and he's a trained military working dog with more discipline than—" She stopped herself. "Then what?" Drake stepped closer, invading her space. "You got something to say about how we do things in Millbrook?" Sarah recognized the game. She'd seen it before, people with a little power trying to provoke a reaction. "No, sir. I'm simply stating that my dog is under control and hasn't threatened anyone." A second officer emerged from the passenger side, younger, nervous-looking, his nameplate reading Officer Hayes. He seemed uncomfortable with the situation but said nothing. Drake pulled out a citation book. "I'm writing you up for public disturbance and violation of dangerous dog ordinances." "On what grounds?" Sarah kept her voice level but her jaw tightened. "I've broken no laws." "On the grounds that I say so." Drake scribbled on the citation. "You're new here, so let me explain how things work. We're a quiet town. We like it that way. We don't need outsiders coming in, causing trouble, acting like they know better than the people who have kept this place safe for generations." "I'm not causing trouble. I'm trying to buy wood stain." Drake handed her the citation, a $300 fine. "You got 30 days to pay. And keep that animal under control, or next time I'll have animal control take him. We don't mess around with dangerous dogs." Atlas was sitting calmly, his training evident in every inch of his posture. There was nothing dangerous about him except his capability, which he would never use without cause. Sarah took the citation, her hand steady despite the anger coursing through her. "Understood." Drake leaned in close enough that she could smell coffee on his breath. "One more thing. Your daddy might have been from here, but you're not. People here look out for their own. You do well to remember that." He climbed back into his cruiser, and Hayes followed quickly, avoiding Sarah's gaze. They drove off slowly, deliberately, making sure she knew they were watching. Sarah stood on the sidewalk, citation in hand, feeling the eyes of the town on her back. Atlas whined softly and nudged her hand. "I know, boy," she whispered. "I know." That evening, Sarah sat on the porch of her father's house, her house now, with Atlas at her feet and a beer she wasn't really drinking. The property was modest, a small 2-bedroom ranch on 5 acres, with woods on 3 sides and a gravel road leading to the main highway. Her father had retired here 15 years ago, before cancer took him. He'd always talked about it being peaceful. But Tom Reeves had been a local. Born and raised in Millbrook, served in Vietnam, came home to work at the plant for 30 years. People had known him, respected him. Sarah was different. She was a woman. She was military, but not in the way they understood. And worst of all, she'd left as a child and come back as a stranger. She pulled out her phone and called her bank. After 20 minutes of hold music and transfers, a customer service representative confirmed what she'd suspected. There was nothing wrong with her cards. The store's machine had simply rejected them, possibly due to merchant error. Possibly, or deliberately. Sarah ended the call and stared out at the darkening tree line. She'd faced combat, insurgents, IEDs, and the constant threat of death in a war zone. She'd earned a Bronze Star for valor and 2 Purple Hearts for wounds sustained in action. She'd commanded Marines in situations where one wrong decision meant body bags. And now she was being harassed by small-town cops and hardware store owners, who saw her as nothing more than an uppity woman who didn't know her place. Atlas's ears suddenly perked up and he released a low growl. Sarah's hand instinctively went to the sidearm she kept holstered at her hip, a habit from the core she hadn't broken. She stood slowly, scanning the tree line. Nothing, just shadows and the sound of crickets. "Easy boy," she murmured. But Atlas didn't relax. His training had taught him to detect threats long before they became visible. Sarah trusted his instincts more than her own. She went inside, locked the doors, and checked the windows. The house suddenly felt very isolated, very alone. She thought about calling someone, but who? She had no friends here. Her military contacts were scattered across the country. Her father was gone. She was on her own. That night she barely slept. Atlas paced the hallway, restless, alert, and Sarah lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what she'd walked into and whether she'd made a terrible mistake coming to Millbrook. By morning she'd made a decision. She wouldn't be pushed out. This was her home now, the only connection she had left to her father. If they wanted her gone, they'd have to do more than glare and write bogus citations. But as she made coffee and watched the sunrise through her kitchen window, Sarah Reeves had no idea just how far the corruption in Millbrook went, or how much danger she and Atlas were truly in. Sarah spent the next week keeping a low profile, focusing on home repairs and trying to avoid confrontation. She ordered supplies online to avoid another scene at Miller's Hardware. She walked Atlas early in the morning and late at night, staying off the main roads. She was a Marine, trained to adapt and overcome, but she was also smart enough to recognize when she was outnumbered. Still, Millbrook was a small town, and invisibility wasn't an option. On Wednesday morning, she drove to the county courthouse to contest the citation Officer Drake had issued. The building was old brick with white columns, sitting in the center of town square like a monument to Southern tradition. Inside, the air conditioning was struggling, and the floors creaked under her boots. The clerk at the traffic violations window was a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and reading glasses on a chain. Her nameplate said, "Mrs. Dolers Finch." "I'd like to file a contest for this citation," Sarah said politely, sliding the paper across the counter. Mrs. Finch glanced at it without picking it up. "You'll need to appear before Judge Carmichael. Next available date is 8 weeks out." 8 weeks for a wrongful citation. That's the schedule. Mrs. Finch's tone suggested the conversation was over. Sarah took a slow breath. "Is there an expedited process? I'm contesting on the grounds that the citation was issued without legal basis." "Everyone thinks their ticket is wrongful, honey. Judge will sort it out." Mrs. Finch turned back to her computer screen. Sarah recognized a brick wall when she hit one. "Fine. What's the earliest date?" "October 15th, 2 p.m. Nearly 2 months away. Sarah filled out the paperwork, knowing the system was designed to exhaust people into just paying the fine. But $300 wasn't the point. The principle was. As she left the courthouse, she spotted Officer Drake leaning against his cruiser across the street, watching her. When their eyes met, he smiled, not friendly but predatory. Then he tipped his hat in mock politeness. Sarah climbed into her car and drove away, her hands tight on the wheel. That afternoon, she decided she needed groceries and couldn't avoid town forever. She left Atlas at home, less ammunition for harassment, and drove to Millbrook's only proper supermarket, a regional chain called Price Saver. Inside, she grabbed a cart and moved through the aisles quickly, picking up basics: coffee, bread, eggs, vegetables. She was in the frozen section when she heard a voice behind her. "You're Tom Reeves's daughter, aren't you?" Sarah turned to find a woman about her age, maybe a few years younger, with kind brown eyes and dark curly hair pulled back in a bun. She wore scrubs, medical scrubs with cartoon characters on them. "I am," Sarah said cautiously. The woman smiled, and it seemed genuine. "I'm Monica Hayes. I was a year behind you in school, but you probably don't remember. You moved away when we were kids." Sarah's memory stirred, vague recollection of elementary school before her mother had taken her to North Carolina after the divorce. "Hayes, are you related to Officer Jordan Hayes?" "Yeah, my little brother." Monica's smile dimmed slightly. "I heard about the citation. I'm sorry. Jordan came home pretty upset about that whole thing." "Upset?" "He said Drake was out of line. Jordan's new to the force, only been on 6 months, and he's learning that not everything is by the book around here." Monica glanced around as if checking who might overhear. "Look, I don't know you well, but your dad was a good man. He helped my mom when she was sick, brought groceries, wouldn't take a dime. So I'm just gonna say this, be careful. Drake and his buddies, they run things their way, and they don't like when people don't fall in line." Sarah studied Monica's face, searching for insincerity but finding only genuine concern. "Thank you for the warning. There's a few of us who aren't like that. Not many, but a few." Monica hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "Give me your number. If you need anything or if things get weird, you can call me. I'm a nurse at County General, so I'm around." They exchanged numbers, and for the first time since arriving in Millbrook, Sarah felt a small crack in the wall of hostility. It wasn't much, but it was something. As Monica walked away, Sarah allowed herself a moment of hope. Maybe not everyone here was against her. On Sunday evening, Sarah was in her backyard with Atlas, running him through training drills. It kept them both sharp and gave Atlas the mental stimulation he needed. He was going through an obstacle course she'd built from scrap lumber, jumps, weaves, a tunnel made from old barrels. She heard the vehicles before she saw them. 2 trucks, rumbling up her long gravel driveway. She called Atlas to her side and walked around to the front of the house. Both trucks were lifted, modified with oversized tires and Confederate flag decals. 4 men climbed out, all in their 20s or early 30s, all wearing camo or hunting gear, all with the swagger of people who'd never been told no. The one in front was tall, broad-shouldered, with a patchy beard and a cap that said Heritage Not Hate. He grinned when he saw her. "Well, well, you must be the Yankee lady we've been hearing about." Sarah stood her ground, Atlas at her side in a perfect heel. "This is private property. You need to turn around and leave." "Private property," the man repeated, mocking her tone. "That's funny. See, this property borders county land where me and my boys hunt, and we've been hunting here for years, since before your daddy died. So we just wanted to come by, neighborly-like, and make sure you understand how things work." "I understand perfectly. You're trespassing, leave." Another man, shorter but thicker, with a neck like a tree stump, spat tobacco juice onto her lawn. "That's a nice dog. Be a shame if something happened to it. Lots of accidents happen out here. Dogs get shot by hunters who mistake them for coyotes. Happens all the time." Sarah's pulse quickened, but her voice stayed ice cold. "You threatening my dog is a mistake you'll regret." The leader laughed. "Tough talk from a woman living alone in the woods. You know, we heard you were some kind of soldier, but that don't mean much around here. This is our town, our land. You're just passing through." Atlas growled, low and dangerous. Sarah's hand tightened on his collar. "I'm asking you one more time to leave," she said quietly. "Or what, you gonna call the cops?" The leader grinned wider. "Go ahead, my uncle's the sheriff, Drake's my cousin. Who do you think they're gonna believe?" The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't random harassment. This was organized, connected. The citation, the cold shoulders, the threats, all part of a pattern. Sarah's mind raced through her options. She was armed, but pulling a weapon on 4 men on her own property could go very wrong, very fast, especially if they had law enforcement connections. She was outnumbered, isolated. But she was also a Marine. "Get off my property," she said, each word deliberate. The leader took a step forward, testing her. "Make me." Atlas lunged, not breaking free from Sarah's grip but surging forward with a bark that could wake the dead. The sound was pure aggression, pure military working dog fury. The 4 men stumbled backward, and one actually fell on his ass. "Jesus," the shorter one yelled. Sarah held Atlas firm. "He's trained for combat. He's taken down armed insurgents. You really want to test him?" The leader's bravado cracked just a little. "You're gonna regret this." "You already do," Sarah said coldly. "Now leave before I let him make you." They retreated to their trucks, shouting threats and curses, spinning their tires on the gravel as they tore out of the driveway. Sarah stood there, breathing hard, Atlas still tense beside her. When the sound of their engines faded, she sank down onto her porch steps, suddenly shaking. Atlas whined and licked her face. "Good boy," she whispered, "good boy." But she knew this was far from over. The next morning, Sarah woke to find her mailbox bashed in, lying in the ditch. Spray painted on her front gate was a single word: leave. She called the Millbrook Police Department. After 20 minutes on hold, a dispatcher told her an officer would be by when available. No one came. She called again that afternoon, same answer. On the third day, Officer Drake himself showed up, took a few photos with barely concealed disinterest, and told her it was probably just kids. "Kids," Sarah repeated flatly. "Happens all the time. You can file a report, but I doubt we'll find who did it." Drake looked directly at her. "You know, if you're finding Millbrook unfriendly, no one's forcing you to stay." Sarah met his eyes without flinching. "I'm not going anywhere." "Suit yourself." Drake climbed back into his cruiser. "But don't say you weren't warned." Over the following weeks, the harassment escalated in small, calculated ways. Her trash cans were knocked over repeatedly. Someone cut her fence, and Atlas nearly got out. Her mail was lost multiple times. She started getting hang-up calls at all hours. And through it all, the police did nothing. Sarah documented everything: photos, timestamps, recordings when possible. Her military training had taught her the value of evidence, but she also knew that evidence only mattered when someone was willing to look at it. She tried to find work, applying for security positions, consulting jobs, anything that would put her skills to use. But every application went unanswered. She called a few places to follow up and got vague excuses. Position filled, not the right fit, budget cuts. Millbrook was closing ranks, squeezing her out. One evening, Monica called. "Sarah, I heard from Jordan that Drake put you on some kind of watch list. They're telling local businesses not to hire you, saying you're unstable, possibly dangerous." Sarah closed her eyes. "On what basis?" "They don't need one, they're just doing it." Monica sounded genuinely distressed. "Jordan's scared. He says if he speaks up, he'll lose his job, maybe worse, but he wanted you to know. Tell him thank you, and tell him I don't blame him." But inside, Sarah felt the walls closing in. No job, no support, a target on her back. The breaking point came on a cold October morning, 3 months after Sarah had moved to Millbrook. She woke to the sound of Atlas barking frantically, not his alert bark, but something desperate, panicked. Sarah bolted out of bed and ran to the back door. Atlas was in the yard, pawing at the ground near his water bowl. Even from a distance, she could see something was wrong. She ran outside barefoot, her heart in her throat. The water bowl was tipped over, and beside it lay chunks of meat. Atlas hadn't eaten any. His training had taught him never to take food from strangers, but he was clearly distressed. Sarah's blood ran cold as she examined the meat. She grabbed a stick and flipped one piece over. A blue-green substance was visible in the center. Poison. Someone had thrown poisoned meat into her yard to kill Atlas. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone and called the police. This time, it wasn't harassment or vandalism. This was attempted murder of a service animal, a federal crime. The dispatcher sounded bored. Someone will be out when available. This is attempted poisoning of a military working dog. That's a federal offense. Ma'am, please calm down. An officer will be there when they can. Sarah ended the call and immediately phoned Monica, who arrived within 20 minutes with a plastic evidence bag from the hospital. "Oh my God," Monica breathed, looking at the meat. "Sarah, this is insane. You need to call the state police, maybe even the FBI. And tell them what? That the local cops are harassing me and someone tried to poison my dog. Without proof of who did it, they'll say it's a local matter." Sarah carefully bagged the evidence anyway. "But I'm documenting everything." Monica helped her secure the yard and check for any other threats. Atlas stayed close to Sarah, clearly understanding how close he'd come to danger. Officer Hayes showed up 3 hours later, not Drake, thankfully. Jordan looked uncomfortable and apologetic. "I'm sorry about the delay," he said quietly. "I came as soon as I could." Sarah showed him the evidence. Jordan photographed everything and wrote a report, but his expression told her what she already knew. Nothing would come of it. "Listen," Jordan said in a low voice as he was leaving. "My sister's worried about you. I am too. Drake and his friends, they're connected to some bad people. People who don't like outsiders, especially outsiders who don't back down." "I was a Marine Corps captain," Sarah said tiredly. "I'm not backing down from small-town bullies." "That's what worries me." Jordan met her eyes. "These aren't just bullies. Drake's cousin runs a meth operation out past Route 9. Half the department looks the other way because his uncle's the sheriff. Anyone who causes problems has a way of leaving town, or worse." Sarah felt the weight of his words. "Are you telling me to run?" "I'm telling you to be careful, real careful." Jordan glanced back at his cruiser. "I have to go, but watch your back." After he left, Sarah sat on her porch with Atlas and tried to process everything. She'd suspected corruption, but drugs. An actual criminal enterprise protected by law enforcement. She was in deeper than she'd realized. That night Sarah couldn't sleep. Every sound made her jump. Atlas was restless too, constantly checking windows and doors. Around 2 a.m., she heard vehicles again, multiple engines coming up her driveway. She grabbed her sidearm, chambered around, and moved to the window. 3 trucks this time, all with their lights off. Dark shapes moved in the darkness. Sarah's military training kicked in. She grabbed her phone, started a video recording, and positioned herself behind cover with a clear line of sight to the front door. Atlas was beside her, silent now, coiled like a spring. The shapes approached the house. One went to her car. She heard the unmistakable sound of slashing tires. Another spray-painted the side of her house, but the third came straight for the door. The door handle rattled, then heavy pounding. "We know you're in there," a voice shouted, the leader from before. "You got 1 week to sell this property and get the hell out of Millbrook, or that dog of yours won't be so lucky next time. Neither will you." More pounding, then the sound of breaking glass from her bedroom window. Sarah's finger hovered over the trigger, her training warring with the reality that shooting someone, even in self-defense, would give them exactly what they needed to destroy her. Then she heard sirens. The shapes scattered, running back to their trucks and tearing out of the driveway. The sirens grew closer. 2 police cruisers pulled up, but instead of pursuing the fleeing trucks, they parked at her house. Officer Drake and another officer she didn't recognize emerged. Sarah lowered her weapon but didn't put it away. She opened the door, keeping the gun visible at her side. "Officers, I have the assault on video. 3 trucks, multiple suspects, destruction of property and direct threats." Drake looked at the gun. "Ma'am, I need you to put that weapon down. This is my property and I'm legally armed. I just recorded a criminal assault." "Put the gun down." Drake's hand went to his own weapon. Sarah knew a setup when she saw one. Slowly, carefully, she set her pistol on the porch table and stepped back, hands visible. Drake walked past her into the house without asking permission. The other officer stayed outside, watching her with cold eyes. "Looks like you've got some property damage," Drake called from inside. "Any idea who did it?" "It's on video. 3 trucks, at least 4 men. One of them was." "Video can be misleading," Drake interrupted, emerging from her house. "Dark night shadows, hard to identify anyone." "You sure you didn't do this yourself for attention?" Sarah's temper flared. "Are you seriously suggesting I slashed my own tires and threw poison into my yard to kill my own dog?" "Seen stranger things. Woman living alone, isolated, military background. Sometimes people crack under the stress of civilian life. PTSD, paranoia, need for drama." Drake spoke loudly, deliberately, like he was building a narrative. "Get off my property. We're conducting an investigation." "Into me, the victim?" Sarah's voice rose despite her best efforts. "I was just assaulted, my property destroyed, and you're accusing me of doing it to myself." "No one's accusing anyone, just exploring possibilities." Drake smiled that predatory smile. "But I am concerned about your mental state and that weapon you were brandishing." "I wasn't brandishing. I was defending my home." "Not how it looked to me." Drake nodded to the other officer. "Get a statement. I'll file the report." Sarah knew exactly what was happening. They were building a paper trail, documenting her as unstable, dangerous, paranoid, setting her up for something worse. After they left, she watched their taillights disappear and felt the full weight of her isolation. She was alone, targeted, and the people who were supposed to protect her were the ones threatening her. She looked at Atlas, who pressed against her leg. "What do we do, boy?" she whispered. For the first time since arriving in Millbrook, Sarah Reeves felt genuinely afraid. Not of combat or death, she'd faced those before, but of a system rigged against her, of enemies she couldn't fight with courage or strength, of a slow, crushing pressure designed to break her spirit. She went inside, locked the doors, and sat in the darkness with her gun and her dog, waiting for dawn and wondering how much more she could take. The next morning, Sarah drove to the county seat 2 towns over and filed a complaint with the state police, detailing everything: the harassment, the poisoning, the assault, the police corruption. The officer who took her statement was professional but skeptical. "These are serious allegations," he said. "Do you have evidence?" Sarah showed him her videos, photos, documentation. He reviewed everything carefully. "I'll file this, but I have to be honest with you, ma'am. Unless we have clear proof of police misconduct or can identify the perpetrators, there's not much we can do. Local jurisdictions handle their own affairs. They're protecting drug dealers." "Do you have proof of that specifically?" Sarah's heart sank. Hearsay from an officer. "Then I can't act on it." He closed his notebook. "My advice: if you feel unsafe, consider relocating. Sometimes that's the smartest option." Sarah left feeling more defeated than she had in years. The system was supposed to work. Laws were supposed to protect people. But when the people enforcing the laws were corrupt, what could one person do? She sat in her car in the parking lot and allowed herself something she rarely did. She cried. Tears of frustration, exhaustion, and fear. Atlas climbed from the back seat into the front and put his head in her lap. "I don't know what to do," she admitted to him. "I don't know how to fight this." But even as she said it, something hardened inside her. She was a Marine. She'd faced impossible situations before. She'd been outnumbered, outgunned, surrounded by enemies, and she'd survived. She wasn't going to let corrupt cops and small-town criminals win. Sarah wiped her tears, started her car, and headed back to Millbrook. She didn't have a plan yet, but she knew one thing. She wasn't running.